Leading up to October of 2023, former corrections officer Jason Pass, aged 47, had been feuding with his upstairs neighbors at the Flatbush Gardens complex in Brooklyn, New York City, for about 4 years regarding noise. On October the 29th, CCTV showed Pass angrily pacing in a hallway before he was approached by his neighbor, Marie DeLille, who was joined by her son, Chinwe Mode, aged 27. In the moments that followed, 47-year-old Vladimir Mathurin, DeLille's husband and Mode's stepfather, stormed out of their home wielding a pair of scissors. Mathurin, an amateur bodybuilder, confronted Pass with the scissors in hand. DeLille pulled him back, but the man shook her off and turned back towards Pass, who brandished a pistol with a laser sight. Mathurin seemingly acknowledged the weapon pointed at him but waved it off and walked back towards his home. Within seconds, Pass opened fire and shot him multiple times. Mode tried to flee, but Pass gunned him down, leaving him motionless in a pool of his own blood. As Mathurin, a father of 4, was struggling to get up, Pass shot him execution style outside his door. He then calmly waited for the elevator, went downstairs and fled the scene. 9 bullet casings were recovered from the scene, and the shooting was described as the bloody culmination of a long-standing dispute between the neighbors. The previous day, Pass had banged on his ceiling because of alleged noises coming from DeLille and Mathurin's home. The latter responded by banging on his floor, which reportedly prompted Pass to make his way up the stairs and kick the family's door. Pass remained on the run until the morning of November the 1st, when he was stopped by law enforcement as he was driving through Brooklyn. NYPD Chief of Patrol John Chell later told the media that Pass jumped out of his vehicle with a knife in hand and took off running. He was cornered by officers who talked to him for about 15 minutes, yelling at him to drop the knife. Pass then charged him with the blade and was shot 4 times, including 3 times in the chest. He was rushed to NYU Langone Hospital in critical condition and ultimately succumbed to his injuries. Number 6. Ryan Whitaker. Officers from the Phoenix Police Department responded to a complaint of noise and possible domestic violence at a home in Ahwatukee on the evening May the 21st of 2020. As later shown in body cam footage, Ryan Whitaker, aged 40, answered his door with a 9mm pistol in hand. Upon realizing that the people who'd knocked were from the police, he instinctively put the weapon behind his back as the officers repeatedly yelled out, "Hands!" Whitaker then moved the gun towards the ground and started getting on his knees. In the moments that followed, Officer Jeff Cook, who was behind Whitaker, opened fire. He shot his service weapon 3 times and 2 rounds hit Whitaker in the back, killing him. The entire exchange had lasted roughly 5 seconds, and it was captured by the body cam of Cook's partner, Officer John Ferragamo. Whitaker's girlfriend, Brandy Nees, emerged from the apartment and, upon asking the officers why he'd been shot, was told, "He pulled a gun on us, ma'am." Distraught, Nees subsequently explained that they hadn't been fighting but playing Crash Bandicoot on a PlayStation, and that the noises were just them shouting comments during the game. Nees told Ferragamo that Whitaker hadn't heard them announce themselves as the police because of loud music playing in the apartment, and that he'd emerged with a gun because of previous instances of unexplained late-night knocking at their door. Leading up to the shooting, no obvious sounds were heard coming from the apartment on body cam audio. Prior to the incident, the upstairs neighbor had called the police twice. In the first call, they'd said, "I can tell that they're just at each other's throats down there." During the second call, placed half an hour later, the neighbor became irritated when asked if he knew whether the people downstairs had a gun and answered no. "But if this gets pushed along any further, I could say yes to all these questions." The operator upgraded the status of the call to an emergency response. The shooting resulted in public outcry and triggered protests. On October the 5th of 2020, hundreds of demonstrators gathered outside the district attorney's office Whitaker's family demanded that Cook face murder charges, that Ferragamo and the 911 operator be terminated, and that the neighborhood called 911 be charged for exaggerating the noise complaint. Ultimately, Ferragamo remained employed by the department. Cook was neither fired nor charged, while Whitaker's family was given a $3 million settlement in 2021. Number 5. Haley Trunser. In the summer of 2019, Georgia woman Haley Trunser knocked on the door of her neighbors, couple Bryson Strickland and Kristen Smith, to complain that her 3-year-old nephew couldn't sleep because of their loud music. Trunser recorded the ensuing interaction on her cell phone. Almost immediately, Strickland, a Bartow County Sheriff's deputy, and his partner started swearing at Trunser as music thumped in the background. The couple repeatedly told the woman to F off, with Smith shouting that she didn't care what time it was. The latter lunged towards her neighbor, and when Trunser threatened to call the police, Smith replied, "We are the police." The couple also claimed that they had children in their home. In spite of being a member of law enforcement, Strickland made no attempts to de-escalate the situation and joined his partner in behaving threateningly towards Trunser. The woman posted the clip to her Facebook, writing, "These are the type of officers that Bartow County employs. This is what's supposed to protect and serve us." Strickland was fired from his position within the Sheriff's Department following an investigation led by the Criminal Investigations Division and the Internal Affairs Office. Additionally, he and Smith were arrested on charges of simple assault and disorderly conduct. Number 4. Thornton Family. On June the 10th of 2023, British couple Adrian and Rachel Thornton were having a barbecue at their house in the hamlet of St. Herbert near Quimper in Brittany, France. The Thorntons' land backed onto a plot owned by Dutch national Dirk Raats, aged 71, with whom they'd been fighting for several years. Rachel reportedly told friends that he'd threatened her and Adrian with a gun after they'd cut down a hedge, with Raats claiming that his home was left exposed to public view. Raats was also frequently complaining about the noise that the family was making. 65-year-old retired teacher Jean Lara spoke to the Daily Telegraph about the situation and stated the noise was constant and, to be honest, sometimes infernal. Her complaints were reportedly shared by other neighbors. Aside from Raats, the British family were said to be often playing music, cutting wood or clearing land, in addition to their dogs barking constantly. In spite of frequent conflicts with Raats, on June the 8th, Adrian moved the children's play area from one part of their garden to another, which was only a few feet from Raats' property. The decision would be interpreted by some neighbors as him deliberately provoking Raats. On June the 10th, as the family were having their barbecue, Raats, armed with a rifle and a revolver, opened fire on them. Rachel screamed at their 2 daughters to run, but it was too late. Their daughter Solange suffered a bullet wound to the heart and died at the scene. Rachel was shot in the back and neck. She narrowly survived and later had surgery to remove the bullets, with the one in the neck being close to a major artery. Adrian was shot in the head and had to be placed in a medically induced coma. He regained his senses and exhibited minimal movement later in the month, but was unaware his daughter had died, and the family feared telling him because of how it would impact his recovery. The couple's second daughter was in shock and had to be taken to a hospital in the shooting's immediate aftermath. Raats, who tested positive for cannabis and alcohol at the time of his arrest, was charged with murder and attempted murder. Number 3. Carlos Rivera. On the evening of October the 23rd of 2022, Chicago man Carlos Rivera called local police and reported a loud disturbance that was keeping him up at his home in an apartment building in the 4300 block of North Whipple Street. 50-year-old Rivera, an avid baseball fan, was an umpire at the Illinois High School Association, who also umpired for local teams. He was reported as generally beloved by his community. After reporting his upstairs neighbor, Rivera stepped out into the hallway to investigate the commotion, at which point he was shot in the face. He was subsequently rushed to Illinois Masonic Medical Center, where he was pronounced dead. Updates from about a month after the incident indicated that investigators hadn't identified the shooter. The upstairs neighbors were initially reported as being uncooperative, but weren't named as suspects in Rivera's death. Cook County Crime Stoppers offered up to $15,000 for information that resulted in the indictment or conviction of whomever was responsible. Today's topic was requested by Dovemaster. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Kelly Danaher. Texas PE teacher Kelly Danaher was having a party at his home in the town of Huffman on May the 1st of 2010, celebrating the birthdays of his wife and daughter, Mindy and Perry. The party stretched throughout the day and loud music enraged Danaher's neighbor, former firefighter Raul Rodriguez. As later reported by his wife, Rodriguez had paced around their home for hours and even alerted law enforcement. When the party didn't stop, he went to confront 36-year-old Danaher. Rodriguez had likely expected an altercation as he'd taken with him his holstered gun, cell phone, flashlight, and video camera. Rodriguez began filming the celebrations and shouted from the driveway that the music was too loud. Danaher and a number of partygoers got into heated arguments with Rodriguez and even called 911 as they tried to get him to leave. Rodriguez, who was at the time in his early 40s, drew his pistol and told them, "Get back, I will shoot you." Danaher told his neighbor that he didn't need to pull a weapon, but Rodriguez spoke into his camera and said, "I'm in fear for my life is in danger." He then called 911 and told the dispatcher, "They're going to kill me," although the video showed the partygoers moving away from him. Danaher's friend, Ricky Johnson, made a series of movements including waving his arms and laughing at Rodriguez, seemingly disregarding the threat he posed. Still holding his gun and camera, the angry neighbor opened fire. He shot Danaher, Johnson, and a third man by the name of Marshall Stetson. Danaher bled to death at the end of his driveway. Johnson and Stetson were rushed to the hospital and survived with various injuries. Rodriguez was arrested and subsequently pleaded not guilty to Danaher's murder, claiming he'd acted in self-defense. Citing the state's stand your ground law, he was found guilty in 2012 and given a 40-year sentence. His conviction was overturned 2 years into his sentence on the grounds of confusing jury instructions. Rodriguez was again found guilty during his 2015 trial, in which his former wife testified against him and was sentenced to life in prison. Our release from a while back about when partying goes wrong is lined up for you after number 1. Stick around if you'd like to watch another episode. Number 1. Marcus Evans and Sean Dagnan. Leading up to January of 2022, British man Marcus Evans, 49, had been living in Thailand for 5 years with his partner Wasana Wanchit in the Markham district in Muang Kanchanaburi. In January, his friend 55-year-old Sean Dagnan traveled to the Southeast Asian country to visit him. On the 22nd of the month, they were playing music from a Bluetooth speaker and drinking bottles of beer outside the single-story rented house. The noise enraged Evans's 23-year-old neighbor, Prasut Thipthep. He confronted the two men and attacked them with a metal sickle, commonly used for harvesting. Evans suffered a fatal wound to the back of his neck, with an inquiry later revealing he'd died from brain stem and spinal cord contusion. Dagnan from Nuneaton in Warwickshire suffered serious injuries but survived. Thipthep was arrested and charged with intentional manslaughter after he was found hiding in a nearby house while trembling and covered in blood. Number 8. The Boylan Family. On the night of March the 3rd of 2017, a raucous house party unfolded at an address in Williamsburg, Michigan. According to local law enforcement, the gathering was hosted by the Boylan family, consisting of 18-year-old Hannah, as well as her parents, Dwayne and Jeffrey. The latter was described as a volunteer assistant football coach at Elk Rapids High School. A large number of teenage students from the school were present at the party in question. In interviews with the police, some of the partygoers revealed that they were instructed to give Hannah $5 for alcohol and pizza upon their arrival at the house. There was also a stocked bar in the basement, and many of the underage revelers occupied their time by playing drinking games. In the days that followed, rumors began circulating that Jeffrey had had intimate relations with one of the partygoers. The student was said to have been at the age of consent, so the man wasn't criminally charged for the encounter. He was, however, arrested in connection with the underage drinking he and his wife facilitated. Jeffrey, Dwayne, and Hannah were all arraigned on charges of selling or furnishing alcohol to a minor and allowing minors to consume alcohol. Dwayne and Hannah agreed to plea deals, sparing the latter any jail time. Her mother, meanwhile, was sentenced to 30 days in jail, which was ordered to begin immediately after the conclusion of Jeffrey's 60-day sentence, the maximum term allowed by law. Number 7. Richard Maurice Colbert. The Miami Police Department received a call about an out-of-control house party on May the 7th of 2022. Witnesses claimed to have seen some of the 50 or so attendees tossing glass bottles at passing cars. Upon arrival, officers encountered Richard Maurice Colbert, better known by his stage name, I Love Memphis. The hip-hop artist, who rose to prominence following the release of his Billboard-charting debut single, Hit the Quan, in 2016, was slurring his speech and smelled strongly of alcohol while speaking with law enforcement. When asked to identify himself, Colbert was unable to do so, and the officers subsequently moved to arrest him. As police attempted to handcuff him, he tensed up his body and shouted insulting profanities at them, refusing to cooperate. After the 29-year-old rapper was eventually wrangled into custody, he faced charges of resisting arrest and disorderly intoxication. Number 6. Miranda Hinnant. In the early hours of July the 12th of 2021, an officer from the University of Central Florida Police Department pulled over a vehicle near the intersection of Alafaya Trail and Gemini Boulevard in Orlando. The driver, a university student named Miranda Hinnant, indicated that she and her 3 passengers were coming from a local college hangout and sports bar called the Knights Library. When asked if she'd had anything to drink, 19-year-old Hinnant said she'd consumed 3 beers. The officers, who claimed to have been overwhelmed by the stench of alcohol, subsequently requested that Hinnant step out of the vehicle to perform sobriety tests. In the traffic stop's official report, it was noted that the young woman had trouble tracking the light of the officer's stimulus with her eyes. When asked to perform the walk and turn exercise by maintaining a straight path as she moved, Hinnant was unable to do so. She was also unable to balance herself on one leg and was subsequently taken into custody on suspicion of DUI. Hinnant was taken to the Orange County Jail while her vehicle was released to a sober friend. Number 5. Scottish Party Goer. A Scottish man's especially rowdy night of partying was the subject of a viral morning after video that made the rounds in April of 2019. The unnamed man recorded himself as he described in amusing detail the circumstances that led to him waking up in a complete stranger's house. Following a particularly rambunctious house party the night before, he'd summoned a taxi to take him home. When the taxi never arrived, he decided to return to the home where the gathering had taken place, but drunkenly stumbled into the wrong house. After rummaging through the kitchen and attempting to make himself some instant noodles, the man crashed on the couch. He awoke the next morning terribly hungover, with 2 strangers standing over him. Fortunately, the homeowners empathized with the man's predicament and made him a cup of tea before sending him on his way. Number 4. Mateo Pinzon Penagos. Deputies from the Polk County Sheriff's Office in Florida responded to a home in the Cypress Point gated community in Davenport on July the 22nd of 2020. The department had reportedly received numerous noise complaints in relation to a house party being held at the residence in question. Upon law enforcement's arrival, the partygoers began to disperse, with one of them, a 16-year-old from Winter Garden named Ryan Collum, getting behind the wheel of a Kia Stinger. In his bid to flee the scene, Collum struck 4 other 16-year-olds who were standing in the driveway as he made his reckless escape. One of the pedestrians, a female, was dragged beneath the car for about 450 feet, roughly the length of 2 Boeing 787 Dreamliners. She was consequently left with a permanent serious injury, the specifics of which weren't disclosed. The 3 other teens reportedly suffered non-life-threatening injuries. Collum drove off but was later located about 8 miles away. Following his arrest, police shifted the focus of their investigation to the host of the unlawful open house party. The property had reportedly been rented through VRBO by a man from Corpus Christi, Texas. However, following further investigation, authorities learned that the Texas resident's identity had been stolen. 18-year-old Mateo Pinzon Penagos, a high school student from Orlando, was subsequently identified as the individual responsible for both the identity theft and the party. Penagos was arrested on charges of burglary, criminal use of personal identification, and allowing minors to consume alcohol. Number 3. Bryce Waters, Deanna Bake, and Brenda Garner. A scene of sheer chaos erupted at a house party in the 3600 block of Santa Sabina Avenue in Las Cruces, New Mexico during the early morning hours of July the 10th of 2020. Just after 2 a.m., local police received several calls about gunfire breaking out at the residence. Officers were dispatched to investigate, whereupon they came across a 16-year-old partygoer suffering from a gunshot wound that hospital workers later determined to be non-life-threatening. Following a preliminary investigation into what had transpired at the unruly gathering, authorities established that at one point one of the attendees had opened fire with a rifle, hitting the teenage victim. Investigators also confirmed that several of the partygoers were underage, at least 3 of whom were intoxicated. Police arrested a trio of suspects identified as Bryce Waters, Deanna Bake, and Brenda Garner. When police had initially arrived at the scene, they attempted to stop a vehicle from leaving, at which point they were assaulted by Waters. While the latter was being taken into custody, Bake and Garner allegedly stepped in to fight the officers on his behalf. Bake's mother was accused of helping her rent the property where the party was hosted. The event was originally organized to celebrate Waters' birthday. The latter told detectives that he'd obtained a large amount of alcohol for the get-together and also admitted to charging a $2 entry fee. He was charged with contributing to the delinquency of a minor, battery upon a peace officer, and assault upon a peace officer. As of the most recent updates on the matter, the shooter, who wasn't identified, was still at large. Number 2. South Kingstown Party. At around 6:30 p.m. on October the 8th of 2022, the police in South Kingstown, Rhode Island, received reports of a large house party making excessive noise. Responding officers came across 350 to 400 partygoers, many of whom were intoxicated, and also noted that red Solo cups had been strewn all over the property. Investigators subsequently determined that the house was being rented by students of the University of Rhode Island. 4 individuals were arrested in the aftermath of the rager. They were identified as Anthony Galbuni, Ryan P. Brom, James Geeson, and Sean Healy, all of whom were below the legal drinking age of 21. The students consequently faced criminal charges that included possession of alcohol by an underage person, furnishing alcohol to minors, and obstructing an officer in execution of duty. As of the latest developments, the investigation was still ongoing and authorities were still deciding whether to bring charges against the property owners as well. Number 1. Travis Turkle. 42-year-old Travis Turkle from Rayland, Ohio, was arrested following a wild party at his home on the night of August the 6th of 2022. An estimated 200 teenagers, many of whom were friends of Turkle's son, congregated on a man's property located 135 miles east of Columbus. News of the gathering spread like wildfire on social media as more and more teens showed up at the house, exacerbating the crowd's unruliness. The rowdiness eventually escalated to the point where several physical fights broke out among attendees. A number of people landed in the hospital as a result of the violence, including a boy whose face and head were covered in cuts from a broken bottle, a girl who was punched in the face, and another boy who was pistol whipped in the head. As the situation spiraled out of control, Turkle went inside the house to retrieve a shotgun, which he then fired into the air to encourage partygoers to leave. Although no one called 911 to alert the authorities, the police caught wind of the situation after the injured attendees were transported to the hospital. Officers subsequently went to the home to investigate. Turkle told them that he hadn't fired any weapon as witnesses claimed, but that the fights had started after he'd tried confiscating inebriated people's car keys. In spite of the man's claims, officers reportedly recovered 2 spent shotgun shells, which were found among the countless cans and bottles scattered around the property. Turkle maintained that he was out with his girlfriend for most of the night, but testimony from partygoers indicated that he'd been present at the house throughout the evening. He was arrested on charges of endangering children, using weapons while intoxicated, and aggravated menacing. While Turkle awaited his case's next steps, investigators continued looking into the brawls that resulted in 3 teens' hospitalizations. Thanks for watching. Would you rather wake up to construction noises early every morning? Or try to fall asleep every night while your upstairs neighbors were playing loud music? Let us know in the comment section below.